Okay, welcome and good evening, everybody, to the Permanent Public Building Committee for Monday, July 24th. 2023, we are doing a virtual meeting on Zoom, so we'll follow the same procedures that we have for months now, for probably years. But we do not have a quorum, I believe, to approve the minutes. So we'll have to wait till Roy joins us later on if we can approve the minutes. But tonight's meeting only has two topics. There are no voting items from a study standpoint. There are a couple of invoices, and I believe we have a quorum for those invoices in the respective agenda item. No, Catherine?
I don't believe so. We need one more person.
Okay, so we'll have to wait till Roy. All right, so we are going to hold off on the approve the minutes. But the two agenda items we have tonight is the RTU replacement update. And then we also have the second main item, which is the DPW feasibility study. So why don't we move right into the RTU replacement for Elliot? And do I turn that to you?
Yeah, I'll kick it off and then turn it over to David Billings. The first item that we want to go through is the discussion of the pre-qualification of the HVAC prime contractors. And there was a memo that was sent around on Friday to everyone. But David, maybe you take it over from there.
Sure. On June 22nd, we sent out a request for qualifications. This is a standard form. It's based on DCAM criteria. On July 7th, the town received 8 statements of qualifications, which we reviewed as a committee on July 12th. We reviewed their history, their capacity to do the work, their ability, their experience doing similar projects. And we, as a committee, ranked based on the criteria for each of these contractors. And we came with 7 contractors that we deemed to be pre-qualified for both the HVAC and as a prime contractor. These are Ambient Temperature Corp, CAM HVAC, Amati and Sons, Enterprise Equipment, General Mechanical, and JF White. They've all done similar types of work, and this we all, they all scored high enough to be pre-qualified.
So those are actually 6.
Okay, what are the guys? Oh, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you're right. Sorry. We got 7 submissions and 6 were pre-qualified.
And I think the having 6 potential bidders for the prime on this is a good thing. Hopefully we will get at least 3, if not more, who actually come forth with the bids. Tonight, I think we really wanted to have any input, but also just to request acceptance by the PBBC of the recommendation of the files of the subcommittee.
So the given that we don't have a quorum, Hank and I spoke, depending on what the questions are from the committee, but with the number of pre-qual, it seems that we have a good number. If the committee members attending tonight are okay, if we have consensus, we'll ask Hank to go forward, and then I think Hank just asked town council if there is any concern relative to direction from the committee members in the meeting tonight.
Question?
George?
We haven't done work with any of these before, have we?
General Mechanical, yes.
Oh, yes. Okay.
And
Were they a,
Catherine?
were they a sub?
Yes, so we've never, I don't think we've ever done an HVAC prime contract.
Prime, that's right. Okay.
It's always been with
A
the
sub on
DEC.
what project?
I'm trying to remember. Let's see, did they do the, they do the high school edition?
What contract are you referring to? I'm sorry.
General mechanical.
There was one subcontractor who was not pre-qualified, who we have worked with before.
So it's not always a good thing.
Yeah,
Well, all of these contractors have done large types of projects. Yes, they are usually a subcontractor, but I've used HVAC contractors as prime contractors, usually on like accelerator repairs from the MSBA program, boiler replacements, those types of projects that are very specific to just the HVAC. And usually you have associated work, door replacements, window replacements that becomes part of that project. So they are used to managing other subcontractors, which is really the prime's job. So we felt that all 6 of these have the capacity and the experience to do this project.
Okay. The other question I had related to the experience they've had as a prime. Have any of them had experiences as a prime? Or have all of them? I'm curious. It's different being a sub and a prime. And it's easier to be a sub, in my opinion, than a prime.
I think,
mentioned, David,
if I recall, David, I think they all did, because that was one of the criteria that in particular I looked at, was to make
Yep.
sure they had at least a couple of projects worth of experience as a prime.
Yeah, they had to be DCAM certified as a prime contractor. Most of the information they have is on their major HVAC projects, and they're usually the subcontractor on that. It's just the way the format and the information that they give. But in order to be DCAM certified, they have to have the experience.
And all met the DCAM requirements.
Yes.
Was there any hesitation on your part for any of the prime contractors?
Only the one.
Little thing, I think they all had like little quirks, George, but there was nothing that, with the exception of the one that we disqualified, that we had any severe reservations about.
Okay.
Yeah, I've worked with Ambient. They're the ones who oversee our PMs and our filter changes right now. They've also were awarded the library chiller, and they were the HVAC sub for Memorial Park. I've worked with Cam. I'm looking through the list now. I sorry, I didn't look at it. And then Enterprise just won the bid for the high school boilers.
Okay, so Ambient, we're currently working with, and one of the just won the contract for the high school boilers.
Yeah, and they're a big company. They're in. I know Enterprise. I've worked with them in the past, not for the town of Needham, but I have worked with them in the past as well.
Okay.
and Matt, you've worked with
Yeah.
a number of these before, haven't you?
Yes, I've worked with all of these contractors, some more than others, but yeah, Cam, General, Enterprise. I'm very familiar with at least 5 of the 6.
Any difficulties with any of them?
No, nothing outside of the normal range of questions. and concerns. Nope, we had a rigorous process that Hank and Barry and myself and David sat through, as well as Ken, to assign points to different categories for each contractor. We had experience, and we had a list of their experiences. So I think we all feel confident in the team's decision.
Okay,
Other questions?
not for me at this point.
All right. I don't have any questions. As I said, I think that there's a sufficient number of pre-quals, given that you guys have looked at the ability of prime and the other issues, what we can do. And I know we have 4 of us. Yes, 4 of us. I don't know if that makes a quorum, but at least a consensus that we can go forward with. And I would just ask Hank, if there's no objections from the committee, I'll put it that way. If there's no objections from the committee, I will suggest and recommend that we move forward with this pre-qual list and just ask Hank to verify with town council if there is anything out of ordinary procedurally for that. Usually we do vote, and we
But I
fill.
don't think it's a requirement, Stuart.
Okay, because we
that we
voted
vote
in
on
the past, we have voted for these, and we have signed off on the sheet as a committee.
Mr. Chair, I would recommend that the next time we do have a quorum, that we have a ratification vote, just to kind of make sure that everything's tied out.
Okay. That, everybody agree with that, George?
That's fine.
Okay.
I would check with town council, because I don't think this particular item needs has a requirement for a vote from the committee.
Okay.
Because all we're doing is putting people on a list of approved contractors.
I think the committee has followed the proper process. You voted and approved the subcommittee,
Yeah,
and they made their recommendation. And it sounds like
I'd like to hear town council's comment, but I'm pretty sure that we've done everything we need to do, and we can just approve without a quorum.
Okay.
But you can
Okay.
check with them.
Okay. With that, then I think we're good. Project update invoice. We can't do invoices, but any further on the update?
yes, I did send cost estimate. Let me pull that up. Soon. Budget. We went through the cost reconciliation process. Let me share my screen. Make this a little bigger. And from design development until the reconciled CD estimate, it proved that we reduced the number of filed sub-bids down to the built-up roofing system and the electrical, and of course HVAC as the prime. So as you can see, comparing the prior estimate with the current estimate, the direct costs were in the same range as our DD estimate. And with that, but since we're that much further along, the design contingency and the escalation to construction start got reduced appropriately, bringing the total cost down by over $500,000, closer to by about $500,000, compared when you put together all of the construction costs that include the cost escalation, general conditions, bonds, insurance, overhead, and profit. A lot of that was attributed, I think, to the redesign that GGD put together based upon prior discussions and the using of dunnage on the rooftop as opposed to doing modifications to the structure within the building. And when we put in the soft cost and owners and construction contingencies, it brings us up to the $4 million range. And that's really what our target was for the Elliott School project. The air source heat pump, alternate number 1, also got redesigned and relocated to a lower roof between 2 of the smaller existing rooftop units. However, when we come back to the committee at the end of August with the bids in hand, we'll have to make a decision as to whether to accept or reject alternate number 1. There's certainly plenty of money in the total budget to accommodate that. But we're anticipating that the Broadmeadow project will be the larger of the 2, the more expensive of the 2 projects, because it has 5 rooftop units, not 4 rooftop units. So I just wanted to alert you all to that issue. And probably we don't want to spend down our owner's contingency too early. But that'll be a future discussion once we have the actual bids in hand. The other factor is that with the design of rooftop unit 2 that also uses those air source heat pumps, our potential reimbursement goes up to somewhere in the $200,000 to $250,000 range. Now, where that might be used to cover the majority of the alternate, the money technically has to get returned to the general fund and then reappropriated to the project budget. So again, we'll have further discussions with the committee once we have the bids in hand, and we can go through some of those logistics in advance with Director of Finance. Any other questions about this cost estimate comparison?
And if you could refresh our memory, the rebate is coming from what source?
Rebates coming from Eversource.
Okay.
And it's, well, as you know, we're also getting some credit for the transition to all electric.
Mhm.
But it's mainly the RTU number 2, where we have air source heat pumps serving both for heating and cooling, which will make a difference. While it's more expensive than a standard box, It was really the only way that we could fit that equipment on the rooftop in that location. So it was a logistical as well as a energy.
So we would have to put this in as a warrant article and get town meeting approval?
If we were to return any rebates to the project. And I would think that we'd have time to do that.
I'm sorry, we have to vote town meeting to get a rebate? I'm sorry, I don't follow.
you know,
The rebate comes back to the town, and goes into
Correct.
the budget.
Yeah, it
And the
does,
town meeting would have to do that to appropriate back to the project?
Right.
yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize we had to do that because I would have thought that the project was, it was associated to the project anyways.
But you can't get a rebate sent back to the project.
Right.
It has to go through,
It has to go to the town, but I thought it'd be directed to that. Okay. Neither here nor there.
I believe that's the way it works. Hank, is that correct?
That's my understanding. I can double check that with town council.
Yeah.
It makes sense. The town is the account holder, so they would
Right.
qualify for the rebate.
Yeah,
So if we're planning on using that rebate money for the project, then we have to plan ahead to, once we know what the amount of the rebate is, then we have to ask for that in a warrant article or some other part of the town budget.
Yeah.
correct. And I would think it'd be a lot easier for them to authorize that, given that it was generated through the project.
Yeah, the only problem is timing, Hank. Very
Yeah,
often, those rebates don't come until the project's over with, in which case, it messes things up for us in terms of being part of the project budget.
right. We do have, since the two projects are separated by 1 year, we would finish up the Elliott School during the summer of 2024. And if we know and have received the rebate prior to special town meeting in the fall, that might be an opportunity to reallocate those funds.
But the rebate would be after both pieces, right? Or is there a rebate per project?
Per project.
Okay, all right.
Well,
Yeah, because
I'll let you
we're,
work that out with Dave Davison.
yes. I did have that initial discussion and he did indicate that it would have to be reappropriated.
Yeah.
And it couldn't be just a reappropriate any amount. He said you have to have a specific amount.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions? Okay. So Hank, that would be the project update.
Yes, and in my email, I gave you a brief schedule. We have a walkthrough on the 3rd of August, filed sub bids due on the 17th, prime HVAC bids due on the 24th of August, and we'd be back to the committee to approve the low bidder on the 28th of August, second meeting in August. And invoices, I guess we would have to wait until to see if Roy can join us. But were there any questions about the invoices that were sent around?
Only one, which is the Hill International NV.
There's
Sorry,
3.
two. Yeah, there's 3, but they are all for the RTU. That's correct. Consulting Engineers, Hill International, and then NV5 for commissioning.
No questions.
Okay, no questions, then Hank, I think we can close out this topic.
Yep.
Okay, all right, thank you.
All right,
We will wait
Okay.
for the invoices if Roy joins us, and then we can do that. Now we will shift to the DPW feasibility study. And do we have the folks from Weston?
They are not available. Two of them are on vacation, and Jeff was hoping to join us. But he had a prior meeting that he's attending right now concurrently. So they did update and send through the feasibility study, and suggested that I walk you through that. They unfortunately, because the committee wanted to have this update tonight, Jeff had a prior commitment.
Okay. I
And
mean, the one thing that I did review it. I don't know if ever others had a chance to review it, and maybe you can walk through it, Hank, but I saw a few changes just by laying out the examples, but I also think there's one chart missing that would be helpful that I suggested in the previous meeting. Because this deck will then go to the board of the select board.
yes,
So I guess why don't you walk through it, Hank,
When is that supposed to happen?
tomorrow?
that's tomorrow evening.
I see.
And
I feel a
It is-
little, just a comment generally, I feel a little uncomfortable that we would be passing this along to the select board without a quorum of our members having seen it and approved it. We saw a version of it at the last meeting. I believe it was the last meeting,
Yes, correct.
but well, let's go through it, but I feel a little uncomfortable about that.
Yeah, and I understand where you're coming from, George. I didn't see, from our last meeting, we went through it. I didn't feel like there was any recommendation. It was more of an update of the approach and some of the findings. The only caution I would hope that the presentation tomorrow, Hank, would be is that we're still in process, but this gives the insight to the approach. It gives some of the information. I mean, just from the conversation that we had in the last meeting, parcel 74, whether it's 3 sites, 1 site, whether it's in the middle, the site test fits, none of that is determined. It is just a framework on which we'll start moving forward with, ironing more of it out. And George, I don't know if you want to attend or can attend tomorrow or be available. I'm trying to make my schedule available. We can maybe help direct any level of dialogue that may be going down the wrong path, so to speak.
Are the test fits included in this? I'm sorry.
Yes,
well, they're
but that's the examples.
they're just there are no plan diagrams at all, George. And I can well, why don't I go through it but you'll
Okay,
see
go
a
ahead.
lot of very familiar slides.
Yep.
And a few additions. And it is intended to be an overview and an update only, no conclusions as of yet, but requesting input and discussion. I think the most important thing, and we discussed this the last time, was to highlight the deficiencies of the existing facility. And I would encourage both select board members and PBBC members to come and look at the existing facility at 470. It's been at least 5 years since folks have walked through there, and it hasn't improved during that time frame.
Sorry, Hank, do we know the time slot that the meeting is tomorrow for this agenda item?
I do not yet. I will. After I get through this, I will confirm.
Stuart, it's 7:30 on the agenda for tomorrow
7:30.
night.
Thank you. Okay, sorry, go ahead, Hank.
So the primary issues, and you perhaps remember some of these issues as we were discussing the public safety building. There's a lack of compliance with today's building codes. There's a limited sprinkler system. There's no ADA accessibility. There's inadequate egress. And fire separation between the floors is also inadequate. The toilet facilities do not meet current code. And they are in the largest toilet facilities are on the upper floor, which is only accessible by stairs. Ventilation of the central bay does not exist. And when the vehicles are going through there, they don't run them during the once parked, but there's inadequate air exchanges within those systems. The framing, structural framing in areas is deteriorating, and I think you've previously seen some of the joists that are within the truck storage bay. The program that exists in the building today is less than half the size that is really needed compared to the program that was outlined in the initial study. And there are inadequate material storage areas, undersized maintenance areas. And I think, Shane, correct me if I'm wrong, but it really does not show much respect for the employees of the DPW.
That is correct.
On the previous comment that was made about carbon monoxide, are there carbon monoxide detectors in the building, or are they inadequate, or?
I believe they are inadequate. I know when our department used to be on the second floor, you could smell the exhaust all the time.
Right.
And right now, the second floor is largely used only for storage, file storage, but it is also used currently for bunking down during storms.
Is that,
Yeah.
does the building inspector know that?
Building inspector refuses to go in the building.
Right, I'm amazed that that's used for that, because that's the main reason, one of the main reasons we left that building and decided to only use it for storage. That must have been an administrative decision that someone made, that people could sleep there with potential carbon monoxide issues. Boy, I wouldn't go there.
Well,
That's why I asked about the building inspector.
Anyway, there are obvious concerns. There's really no other. Well, there are few other places where snowplow operators can bunk down because sometimes their breaks are in the middle of the night and sometimes their breaks are in the middle of the day. If it's a 24-hour storm. And so in any case, I would encourage you all to, we could set up a time if you want to go through. Shane, I'm sure you'd be more than happy to bring people through any other time as well.
Yes.
Unfortunately, I'm intimately familiar with the building. I don't want to go to another walkthrough.
Okay. I'll send that around as another option if people who haven't had the opportunity to go through are willing and interested. This is the overview of the space needs as we discussed the last time. Since the 2016 study, two divisions have been added to the study, that being the RTS and the Building Maintenance Department. And while this total of 130,000 adds up all of the pieces of each division, we're not looking for any, in the current studies, we're not looking for any building to accommodate that full build. And if there is some sharing of spaces, the total square footage could be reduced because there'd be sharing of some of the common spaces, meeting rooms, so on and so forth. Total of 111 staff between all of those divisions, and a total of 210 vehicles of varying sizes. The details of those, the staffing and the vehicles, their age and replacement dates, future replacement dates, will all be included as part of the full report. We looked at various groupings as we discussed the last time, and the hybrid scenario 3 group 1, where pretty much everyone is all together, the only place where that could fit would be at parcel 74. Otherwise, as you'll see in some of the other upcoming slides, doing hybrids of 2 departments or 2 or more departments together at different locations is what the Weston and Sampson focused on. They did look at all of the parcels that are controlled by the town, filtered them, ranked them, looked at existing uses, usable land area, and other constraints, and identified these sites as the preferred sites for detailed investigation. The Hillside School, once it is no longer utilized by the school administration temporary function, parcel 74, which is over here, the complex at Dedham Avenue with 470, 484, and 500, the PSAP building, RTS and Cogswell, and then the Daly building, which is behind Fire Station number 2. They did look at a variety of scenarios, and in our last meeting, we took several of them off the table, so we won't show them at all, and added one based upon the last discussions. Their key considerations are to keep the administration and engineering together. The recycle and waste would remain at the RTS site. Building maintenance is not necessarily tied to the other divisions. So as it is today, it could remain on a renovated or reconstructed Daly building site. And there's desire to reduce the program at 470 and potentially reuse the 6-bay garage also at 470. The complexity, the site complexity of 470 of how to rebuild on that site while maintaining operations from that area is something they're looking at, but don't have solutions for quite yet.
Before you move on, I have a question.
Yeah,
Did they look at any facility outside of the existing spaces that the town owns? For example, are you familiar with the building that's right next to Cutler Park? It's a large warehouse type building.
The auto
Used to
parts
be
store?
The auto parts place.
Yeah.
There's evidently, that building is going to be fully available for lease and maybe even purchase. I haven't investigated. It's not my place to do that, but have they looked at anything like that? Any parcel outside of the existing owned land as a potential location for maintenance of equipment that would take the place of 470 as an option?
no, I do not believe that we have. We could certainly discuss it with town manager. I know that in several prior projects, sites miraculously appear before us, like Sunita Williams and
Yep.
and the CAF.
I'm just thinking that if that site were a possibility, I have no idea what its costs would be, but I don't think it's as desirable as the land on the other side of Kendrick Street in terms of that. And I think they've had trouble keeping that place leased, the entire place leased. A portion of it, yes, but I don't think they've ever had the entire place fully leased. But anyway, that's a crazy idea, but I think it's something that we need to think about in terms of thinking outside the box if we don't have space available that we own.
I can certainly raise that question with town manager.
I think it would be a good idea.
What we
Right
would
now,
do-
if you look at what we've already done on this, there aren't any easy sites. There
Oh, no.
truly aren't.
No, and nobody wants to live next to the DPW except for Karis,
Yeah. Right.
who grew up
So-
next to one.
So from that point of view, there's no easy ones to implement even. Even if we select a site that we're talking about, none of them are easy to implement overall.
Right.
And that's where I think we ought to say, is there anything other than what we already own?
I know we went through a fair amount of investigation when they're doing the Emery Grover project.
Yeah.
In terms of alternate sites and other options. It's always tricky to study something when the town doesn't own it.
Well, that's true.
And because we have a very public process and
Yeah, but if you run into roadblocks, then you ask the question, is there anything else in town that we should
Yeah.
start looking at as a potential something that we would be interested in?
Shane, are you familiar with that?
Why do we keep losing audio?
What's that? Can you hear me?
Yes,
George, you're fine.
no, I was wondering if Shane is familiar with that site.
Hank, I'm not familiar. What was the location again?
On Kendrick Street next to Cutler's, if you go past the old PTC, which is now ADG, it's on the right-hand side before you cross the river.
Okay,
There's two buildings there. One's an office building, small office building, and then Then there's a warehouse type building there.
Oh, the old auto part warehouse there, just before you get to the JCC, right?
Right.
Before you
Just
cross the
before you-
river. Yeah.
Just before you cross the river.
Yep.
Yep. Anyway,
Hmm.
it's in Needham. It's very accessible. I mean, traffic is traffic. It's going to be everywhere.
Yeah, we'd need to look first at how large the site is
Yeah.
and see if it even, because we we would have to be, likely would have to be parking vehicles and employee cars. So that would be the first filter. Sure, we can look that up, and if you have others that you think are worthy, I also don't know whether that is affected by the new zoning overlay. Many of those sites, as you've seen, are desirable in terms of future redevelopment because of that zoning overlay.
I don't think it is, but anyway, we can find that out. I'm just throwing things out that I think make sense when you run into roadblocks. Like, I think we're close to running into roadblocks here. But anyway, why don't you move on? I didn't mean to stall the process here.
So these are the key considerations. We've eliminated from this deck of slides some of the test fits that were previously done. In this scenario, the attempt was to well, certainly keep admin and engineering at 500, put as many departments at 470 as possible. This would require some kind of phasing and maybe temporary relocation elsewhere.
Are you working out?
No,
Oh, okay.
I was just saying this is really good.
You want to go on mute, Barry?
I'm
The,
sorry, I'm having problems with my videos and
That's
audio.
okay.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. Hank, I would just advise that the presentation focus on more about the test fits being, what were the key 2 points? One is that trying to keep a couple of groups together because of the synergies within the operational function. And then the other bit was balancing the space. And that's about it for right now, because I think the danger, or I would just suggest, I don't know if we want to be there yet, is we don't want to lock it. These are the only scenarios. These are the scenarios that are evolving. They're the ones that we've run for the moment, but those are the two criteria: space and then operational synergies that are driving some of the alignment, and leave it at that, because the input's going to be important. And I don't know if Shane, if you think that, you know, from a DPW standpoint, it's important to mention anything else, but just going back to George's point, which I do take, I think the committee does take seriously, is that where we are, we could potentially be setting expectations too strongly versus here's an update, here's what we're doing, here's the inputs, and we'll come back with more of an update versus this being a first cut at outcome. That makes sense to you. But I don't know, Shane, if you have any.
I mean, my take on it is we focused on town-owned properties. So we should probably show the different scenarios based upon the town properties we've looked at. And then throw in the caveat that George suggested that there may be other alternatives out there not owned by the town that we could look into, provided that these might not be the most advantageous for us.
Right, and I think we kicked that up in the next steps, right, Hank, when later in the slides. All I'm trying to do right now is just suggest that we put the context with these test fits. They're just test fits with what we know today and the work that's done. It's not throwaway, but it's certainly not final. But there is some driving factors again, operational synergies and efficiencies with the property locations.
Absolutely. And I think as we go through the slides, you'll see that these slides aren't suggesting these are the end all be all. These are just an update for where we are to date now that we're 7 months into this process, where we are to date, and we're continuing to explore these options.
And so these are several of the test fits. I should highlight that the yellow colored oval is the existing division in its existing location, whereas the blue oval is a division at a different location than it currently exists on. So in this one, it's pretty obvious then admin and engineering remain where they are. 470 gets redeveloped with fleet and highway. And there is a synergy between those two, as that has some of the largest parking requirements and vehicle requirements for the two. And therefore also it enables maintenance to occur at the 470 site. In order to fit the water and sewer department fully into 480, that likely would require renovation and addition to that existing building. And then building maintenance remaining at the Daily building, but any of these changes might temporarily use the Hillside School as temporary accommodation while reconstruction is occurring elsewhere. Test fit example. Oh, sorry, questions about that?
Yeah, are all the building maintenance folks at the Daily building?
Yes and no.
I thought they were at PSAB.
They're all at the Daily building. I'm the only one at PSAB. All three of my managers are at the Daily building. All the trades are at the Daily building, and the custodial staff. Sorry, my assistant director is also at PSAB, but and then the custodial staff are at their own buildings throughout the town.
Okay.
I think a question also, I noticed that, for example, in test fit A, there's no reference to the Cogswell building. I assume that's because this assumes that the off-season equipment will remain stored at Cogswell. Is that correct? And this assumes only the in-season fleet being stored at 470. Is that correct?
That's correct. If the Cogswell, as you may know, during COVID, Parks and Forestry was stationed over at Cogswell on a temporary basis. And so one of the studies that they might need to look at would be an expansion of that building to house both their equipment and still be able to utilize the building for seasonal equipment as well.
Additionally, with that, Hank, they would need to look at updating the facilities as well, since there's only one makeshift restroom in there and it's on a tight tank currently.
Yeah, and mustering space or meeting space, locker room space, so on and so forth. But there are, I mean, for instance, some of those functions could be permanent modular construction. But those details have yet to be studied on the site plan. Any other?
Is there room for expansion at that site?
We
I was
would have,
under the impression when we did Cogswell that there wasn't a lot of room for expansion.
it would definitely have to go back through planning. It would likely require additional rock blasting to expand the building. But the open shed, as you may recall, was designed so it could be enclosed. Doors could be put onto that open shed building. So as I say, George, we haven't actually seen the site layout options yet.
Right.
Just trying to go through some of these programmatic test fits. This is another example where Fleet moves out to the RTS, and programmatically, the idea of moving Fleet out there was attractive because they don't have a lot of coming and going during the day. The team that does the maintenance shows up in the morning, they leave in the afternoon. And they don't have to drive trucks around to service other areas or functions within the town. And if Fleet goes out to the RTS, then Water and Sewer and Parks and Forestry would remain at 470. And in this scenario, highway either at the Hillside School or parcel 74. And this assumes that similar to prior the 2016 study, that 484 would just be demoed and that site would be converted to other use like parking. Test fit example C. Puts Fleet and Water and Sewer, and then looks to at 470 and looks to either the Hillside School or parcel 74 to accommodate highway and Parks and Forestry. And the final example test fit was one that we discussed last time, where Fleet, Highway, Parks and Forestry, and Water and Sewer are all somehow squeezed onto 470 and the overall site 470 and 484. Keeping all of the functions of the DPW in that zone, but somehow with phasing and the constraint not crossing over the school department, school committee line that was previously agreed.
Are we gonna, sorry, 1 second, George. Are we gonna have time to go through all these scenarios tomorrow with select board?
I know that they'll go faster than I will.
I think we might recommend that, again, that's why I was saying a summary of what the criteria was for driving the test fits. And then maybe walking through one as an example, and then maybe two. One as an example, and then doing a second one that shows how taking some pieces and moving them to a different spot and why there was a benefit, and then leave it at that. Because it could be coming to a working session. I don't know if they've got enough time on their agenda, but I also don't know if we're really at the stage where we can go through that level of detail, and the working group's really responsible for it. So I'm just going to suggest that we ask the walkthrough to be, hit the salient points, but then wrap it. Now, if there's questions in time, let them drive it, but that's just my opinion. So anyways, George, I know you're trying to ask something.
I have to remember what I'm agreeing with you on that, that this is way too much information for all of them. Is just to let them know that this is the level of study we're at right now. We're not at the point where we can come back and say, we recommend this group here for this reason, et cetera. And just tell them what a test fit is. And it's not plans, it's not anything that detailed. But just give them one example of it for it. And that's it. Otherwise, you won't get to the final points you want to make.
Stuart, George, I think the point that we're trying to show here is that we have looked at several different options, the working group. I don't think there's planning on spending a lot of time on any of these test fits, other than showing the select board that we are doing our due diligence as a working group to look at several different possibilities.
I agree, but that's why you say 7 test fits are starting to surface, and you got the slides. They've got the slides in the report to go through it, but how you read the report is, synergy. Yellow is key areas. Blue was 2 areas. That's it. So, anyways, go ahead, Hank.
Okay. So our next steps, continue the discussion with the user groups, actually look at some site plans and leading toward a preferred concept, which would be then recommended perhaps to the PBVC. They are finalizing the building assessments.
Yeah, before you go there, I just want to make sure there's a connection here, because the test fits are important. I believe the test fits are driving the preferred concept, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so we need to make sure that either we change that from finalized preferred concept to master the test fit, or put in parentheses test fits, so people can say, oh, the concept is being derived from the test fits.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, I don't know if people will think that there's a concept is a different thing than what's been being driven.
Okay.
And what is the building if we finalize the existing building assessments, what's that doing other than just documenting that, correct?
It's documenting the deficiencies of each of the buildings.
Yeah, and I think that what we've talked about in the past discussions and what we've all assumed, I'll call it the tacit assumption, is that the building assessments is only exposing deficiencies, but really what the programmatic needs are, correct?
Well, the program is has already been analyzed, and it's about 60 pages long. I'll be glad to forward to the committee if you're interested.
No, I get that, but I just want to make sure, because I mean, I guess I'm just saying, why are we doing that for their sake? I don't. They may not care, but I would think in their seats to go, well, you're doing test fits, you're dying programmatic needs. What do we care about the building assessments, unless the building assessments are how much of reuse we can do versus having to tear down and build? I'm just thinking in layman terms for them and the rest of the public, what's going to be important in that?
Well, I think it's combined also with the permitting analysis, because rebuilding a new building on some of the existing sites may be constrained by conservation and planning, and that will likely further restrict the building footprint that's allowed to go back in.
Okay. All I'm saying is whoever's going to present, I just think it would be a good idea to say, why is it an important next step that's being done?
Okay.
Otherwise, I think most people are saying, I would think the select board and the people that are going to be attending are going to say, well, what's the answer? What are we getting? What do we need and what are we getting? And
we're not there yet, really.
Exactly, George. But I just want to make sure people understand what's trying to be achieved and why. If it's a next step. Otherwise, it's information that's probably not pertinent to them. Pertinent to us as a committee and getting the study done, but
The the important part, I think, that's come out of our discussions relative to project schedule is that phasing is critical to any further development, as it was in the prior phase. That the 3 buildings that have been constructed subsequent to the last study have been successfully utilized or are being successfully utilized. And unlike the public safety building, phasing probably over a number of years is the most likely way to get this constructed.
And
I suppose what we could do is to ask them not to ask questions until the end.
yeah, I would think we may want to do that. But again, I think where we are, I'll just emphasize again, I think the important part is we're not done. We're in the midstream. And that hopefully brings awareness to what's going on, what we're doing, how the team, Weston Sampson, the user group, is putting this information together to drive to a perspective on what is needed, how might we implement that, and then how might we do that, which is the project schedule and the phasing, which is important.
Can I ask another question?
Go ahead, George.
At our last meeting, when we discussed this, I think, Hank, you were going to look at what land was available on that DPW site, especially the area up around the salt shed and the materials laydown area that was not included as part of the school land. Isn't that area where this old salt shed was still available to DPW?
No, it is not. And that was, if you recall, George, in the 2016 study, there was a line that was drawn that went behind the open storage shed, behind the trailer, and then cut across that driveway toward the wetland. And it was pretty much a straight line, although it curved a little bit toward 470. And so all of that zone that is currently being temporarily used by the DPW for their laydown space, including that area that used to be for the salt shed, would all be needed to put in a temporary school on DeFazio parking lot. And at that time in 2016, the agreement was that if the school were to go ahead, that the town would also have to relocate the fuel station, because that would be in the layout that, admittedly, it was an early layout. There was a bus turnaround that came in from that side to service the building. And the footprint of a school building, if it were temporary, it's obviously less expensive to put it in as a one-story structure. But there have been two-story structures as temporary buildings put in, but they tend to be more expensive than the one-story.
Okay, I guess my memory doesn't serve me well, because I thought there was part of the old salt shed lot that was still part of DPW, but if you're telling me no, then I believe you.
Yeah, I will send you the diagram.
I don't need it.
Okay.
I don't think you'll ever see a school built there, but I can understand why they wouldn't want to give up any space.
Yeah, I mean, as you recall, in those last discussions, there was a whole slew of land swaps.
Yep.
And the only one that didn't pass was parcel 74.
The shame of it all is that that area up where the old salt shed was and adjacent parcels there would be ideal for DBW. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I can't disagree, but the line was drawn.
I understand why they wouldn't want to give it up at this point, because it closes out an option of theirs.
Yeah, and we still don't have any answer on the school master plan from MSBA. And those are going to be difficult discussions.
Yep.
Okay. Anything else on this topic?
Yeah, just one other thing. I'd like to encourage the whole committee as well to come take a tour of the facility. All due respect, I know many of you have seen the facility. You know what it looks like, but again, it is 6, almost 7 years have passed since you've been in that building. So you can only imagine what it looks like now. It's deteriorated further. So I strongly encourage every member to take a tour of that building and see it as it exists today and how our DPW employees have to exist in that building. Additionally, the other thing that we haven't really highlighted, but the 470 complex is very tight now. Additionally, with the parking, with the Amity Path being open to the public, that 470 is highly used every day of the week. So there are often times where our own employees will go to try to park if we go out on the road for a site visit, for example, and we come back and it's tough to find parking there because many people from many residents in the community are using that path. It's a great amenity there, but it brings additional cars and vehicles there. So very tight constraints with parking there. And again, I can't emphasize enough the conditions of that building. It warrants. And I think that the members of this committee would do it injustice by not going and visiting the current conditions. I think at a minimum, we should go and look at that and see that to show the respect for the employees that we want to see the current conditions they're living in.
Okay. Good point. I like the last point. Okay. Anything else, Hank?
No, that's it. Do we have any sign of Roy in the waiting room, Catherine?
Nope. We don't.
Nope.
Okay, so I'm gonna wrap this up. I think we should make a note, maybe, probably, I think maybe this, possibly the next meeting or the meeting, second meeting in August, we can bring the topic back up about a visit, and maybe Hank, you could help. We can find a time or a time slot people can come and take a view, and maybe the select board will make some commentary tomorrow night, and maybe we can combine that.
Yeah.
Visit. Okay. All right. With that, thank you for the study update. I will try to be in person tomorrow at the select board. And you said 7:30, Shane, so I'll try and be there beforehand.
Shane, do you know
Sure.
how long?
I'm sorry, Hank.
How long is, how much time do we have?
I think it had allotted a half hour. Hold on, I can pull it back up real quick. Um, 20 minutes is what is allotted on the schedule right now.
Great, thank you. I'll alert Mike Richard will be able to attend that.
Be there as well. Stuart,
Yep, I'm going to be there.
I'll try to be there as well.
Okay, thanks, George.
Sounds good. George Stewart, I'll see you there tomorrow. I appreciate it.
Okay, super. Okay, with that,
Is that it? Select board chambers,
I believe so, yes.
town hall?
Yeah, select board chambers.
Okay.
And I believe you can park in front, George, if you get there. Early
Yeah,
enough.
there won't be a space, but that's all right.
All right.
Also, any of the members that may not be able to make it in person, if you could tune in via Zoom, I think all you'd have to do is just shoot Miles an email to let him know you'll be attending via Zoom.
Mr. Chair, I'm not going to make a motion to adjourn because it would be pointless since we don't have a quorum.
I like that. Well, before we do adjourn, I would just bring up the note about the code of conduct that I forwarded to everybody. We don't have a quorum, but, and Erwin did respond to me. Maybe we'll make that a note to the next meeting. Just open to a few minutes of discussion from the committee to see whether there's anything we should be looking to adopt, whether we just recognize what the select board have done and believe that we can parallel that as is. So I wanted to put a discussion on the table, but there's not enough here tonight to do that. So I will suggest that we push that to the next meeting.
Great.
I do have a question though.
Go ahead, George.
Is this a suggestion that each board or committee should have a code of conduct?
I read it as a subtle message that says if you'd like to adopt something, here's a framework and a reference you can, but the select board said we're adopting the code of conduct. And I didn't feel that I didn't read into it that there was a pressure to do anything, but if we wanted to, and it was suggestive, that's why I'd like to put it forth in the committee and on the table to see how the committee feels. Is there something we should be thinking more formally or not? And spend a few minutes just for that discussion when the time's appropriate.
I think I haven't just go through it yet, but I think we also have to bear in mind too that I think an elected board versus an appointed board, I think are very, very different animals, and it may not exactly fit what we need if we need anything. We determine we need anything, so that's down the road, that discussion.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great. That's good input, Richard, because I agree. I don't suggest to the committee that we take something on for the sake of taking it on, but people feel it's important just to, and we've been such a good committee over the years, and just being able to carry on our work and yeoman's work for that matter. But I don't think there's been any conflict. There's been healthy conflict and debates, but to call that would make me think we would need to go force something like this. But let's put it on the table for the committee. I think it's important for everybody to have a voice.
I think there are some issues, and that's all I'll refer to, that should be brought up and put on the table and discussed by the committee members.
Okay.
If we can ever get a quorum, because I think that we could be a much more effective committee if, for example, everybody did their homework. People attended the majority of the meetings rather than a minority of the meetings. There are some issues that really concern me about that, and probably concern other members of the committee as well. And I think they need to have some discussion, because otherwise those other committee members that aren't necessarily participating full strength are not doing the town a service or themselves by just being on the committee and casting a vote here and there. So I think somehow we've got to discuss that. And I think everybody knows what I'm talking about.
Yep, I agree. Okay.
That's a hard one, but you still have to do it.
We do.
And we also need to discuss once again the line of succession.
Correct. The vice chair. Yep. And I said earlier that in August is when we would try to narrow that down for the fall finalization. So good point. Okay. All right. With that, I believe we are done, and consensus versus a quorum vote might say that we could close this meeting down. Any objection?
No objections.
Hear none, seen none. Consensus reached. All right. Have a great week, everybody.
You too, thanks.
Night.